Every Friday here on the channel, we get a cool, fun, or collectible car. The ultimate is the Survivor Series, and this definitely qualifies, friends. This is a 1977 Toyota Celica GT, or if you're south of the border, Toyota Celica GT. In Canada, it was pronounced Celica when the cars were sold. And this is a 1977, the height of the disco era. Saturday Night Fever came out in 1977, and these cars were very popular. This is the GT model, and this car was not originally sold here in Canada. It was sold in the United States, and it's had the same owner since 1977. So the woman that bought this car in California shortly after moved to Vancouver Island here in British Columbia, and the car came with her, and it's been in her custody ever since, and she has looked after this car. In the late 90s, it was repainted the original color. And in the last 10 years, it's only been driven about 2,000 miles. The odometer right now says 94,000 miles. And from 1977 to today, that is very little in the way of mileage. Now, one thing you notice, the wheels aren't correct. I get that. Somewhere along the way, these aftermarket wheels were added to this car. They actually have spoke inserts that go over top of it. The original wheel was a steel wheel with a chrome ring around it, a sport kind of rally sport wheel. That's what I would get for this car just to make it look period correct. But it's the proportions of these cars from the 70s that just are absolutely perfect. I had an 85 Celica GT, the notchback. That's actually what I drove all the way across the country when I moved here in the early 90s. But this era and the model before this are really quite iconic and beautiful in my opinion. Especially, it's the 4 headlamps just tucked underneath the hood there. The hood flips forward and showcases the 2.2 liter 4-cylinder engine. I think it looks fabulous in this blue and white combination. So Core Motor Cars here in Vancouver now has this 77 Celica or Celica. It is going to be going on Bring a Trailer, and it's going to be interesting to see what the market thinks of this car. Beautiful color, light color interior, really nice shape, a West Coast car its entire life with under 100,000 original miles. So we'll get inside, show you around, take it for a spin, and I'll tell you more about this real Survivor. It's so awesome to get in older cars like this and see just how far things have come in all those years. So the first thing you notice are the very thin A-pillars. You could just put your hand around them like that. Now they're big and heavy. The side mirrors are just these little tiny side mirrors. It's interesting driving here today. I was definitely shoulder checking way more than I do normally because you have a big mirror there usually. Also the thin steering wheel. Toyota sounding horn. And the interior of this with the cream white, I'm guessing that the front seats probably at some point have been redone because they don't match the rear seats. The rear seats have this kind of mesh material that was really popular in the day, and this has been redone. I'm guessing they probably split through the decades and then were refinished with a new insert in the middle. But the rest of it looks absolutely correct. The back cargo mat is absolutely spectacular. And here's one thing that you don't see anymore, and I wish car companies would bring it back, is carpet along the bottom of the doors. So the doors have carpet on the bottom, so when you get in and out and you kick it with your feet, it's not scuffing. You could vacuum it down. I like that. So yeah, it's a 2+2 liftback. It wasn't called a hatchback back then. It was called a liftback. So let's start it up. You know, it's amazing how you can have such close neighbors. Like I'm here in Canada, and then just south of us here is the United States, and we call it Celica, and Americans call it Celica. How does that happen? I could never figure that out. It happens a lot with car names. Another one would be Elantra or Elantra, but Celica is certainly one of them. Now, y'all have to think back to the era when this car was sold. There was a lot of two-door coupes and hatchbacks sold in this era. It was very popular. If you were a young person and you wanted a nice car, a four-door wasn't it. That was your dad's car. It was always a two-door coupe or a hatchback, something fun. That seems to have gone away, and it's a shame because two-door cars are just a different look and feel altogether than four-door sedans. So under the hood of this is a 2.2 liter Toyota engine. As I mentioned, this has just over 94,000 miles on it. The owner did extensive work to the car over the years, including the paint job, as I mentioned, but it runs really well. Now, the big issue for maybe a collector is the fact that it has an automatic transmission. But you know what? That can be rectified. If you really, really, really like this car and you wanted to change it, you could certainly source a manual transmission and have it swapped over. I don't even think it would probably cost that much, but there you go. Of course, the suspension and the way it handles, no power steering. You certainly notice that it's an older car, but overall, cool. So the one I had was an 85. That was the notchback. And I was picking the car up from Core Motor Cars, and I was telling Core, I drove all the way across from Toronto here to Vancouver in that car in 3 days by myself. And that was the cassette era. I listened to every single cassette tape I had, I don't know, 2 or 3 times. I drove by myself in 3 days in a car not too dissimilar to this. So these were very, very popular cars, and you just don't see a lot of them around anymore. Now, if it was a car that lived in an area where there was a lot of salt, yeah, they rusted, and those early Japanese imports definitely rusted out. The ones that we had certainly did. I remember my dad had a Datsun 510, he had a couple of them, and they just rotted away. Now, West Coast cars are the ones that you want, places that are dry. Now, one of the issues you have with sunny locations like Florida and California, everybody thinks that's where you want to get a car because of no salt and no rust. Well, that part is true, but the sun can really damage a car. In areas like this, like British Columbia, Washington State, Oregon, where there's more cloud, you don't have the rust issues either, but you don't get the sun damage, or as much sun damage as you do in sunshine states. It's amazing after all of these decades just how well this thing still drives. It's not particularly powerful. It's got an automatic transmission. I get it, but still it rolls down the road really nicely and absolutely turns heads even today, all those decades later. Thanks again to Core Motor Cars here in Vancouver for letting me borrow this one for the day. It is going to be going on Bring a Trailer. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of attention it gets. It's certainly been getting a lot of attention driving around here in Vancouver. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell because we do an interesting, fun, or collectible car every Friday. We'll see you next week.